One of the things I loved about growing up in the 70s and watching some of the best newscasts I've ever witnessed. I mentioned a few weeks back about Channel 7 and Van Amber, Jerry Jensen, Pete Giddings, John O'Reilly. Um, I forgot to talk about another great team at KPIX, which was owned by Westinghouse back then and now run and owned by CBS. And I'm talking about Dave McElhatton, Wendy Takuda, the great, fantastic, you talk about a real nice person, Joel Bartlett, and another really good man. They were all nice people. But Wayne Walker, sports anchor, a character, a straight man. Straight man in the sense of delivered all his sportscast duties and had kind of a celebrated life. And Wayne was a really good person. But the thing about KPIX and McElhatton started out on radio at KCBS and became very, very popular. And one of the few transitional people to go from radio to television. And he was fantastic. And he had a wonderful personality. He was as jovial and cool off the air as he was on the air. Great news guy. Now, Wendy Takuda was good. She had problems delivering her lines every now and then, but a nice lady, and she's still around. Uh, I believe she lives in the city and gets around. But Channel 5 in those days, they were always a perennial number two. But they had good lead-ins, they had good programming from the network, and McElhatton, and did a really, really good job. McElhatton was just fantastic. And he always was a gentleman. He would shake people's hands, and not that he would be otherwise, but some of those people could have real egos, right? And they'd act like jerks and all that. And they didn't have to. McElhatton was a real mensch. And when he went from KCBS to KPIX, a lot of people didn't think it was going to work. That's what I heard. I was a little kid back when he started out. But McElhatton made the transition. He was very smooth and very, very competent. And his news acumen, his chops, made it a far easier transition. Look, he didn't have the most wonderful looking face. He may not have been even considered in today's world of television news, but he was so solid and so heralded as a news person, having worked at KCBS and going from there to television. They welcomed him with open arms and he became a success. You know, he also, by the way, was a San Francisco State alum. So the Bay Area was well regarded at Channel 5, as they called it. And then Channel 5 was on Van Ness Avenue in the 60s and 70s. And then in 1980, they moved over to where they are now on Broadway and Battery. And they do all their news shows. They do all their regular programming. And I also have to mention somebody who I got to know very, very well. And I think I wrote about this, but I'm not sure. But Doug Murphy, the late, great Doug Murphy. Doug left us in 2005. Very tragic situation. I may talk about that someday, but I'll give you a little bit of a filler bit on that in a minute. Doug was about as solid as they could be. Good looking guy. He did the news and he did sports, and he dated for a while Kate Kelly, the celebrated news anchor at KPIX. Kate, who went to Stanford and got to know Doug, and they were a power couple. But Doug hung out at a little tavern up in the Rockridge area of Oakland, almost near where I live, called the King's X. And Doug used to smoke a lot of cigarettes and drink a lot of Amstel Light. I know that firsthand. He was a character. He was a real gentleman, a great, great sports fan. He loved life. He um, he bought everybody drinks at the King's X. Everybody knew Doug, and he had that kind of jovial personality, right? An old style guy who, he had probably a few too many Amstel lights every now and then, but responsible nonetheless. He had people that picked him up, drove him around when he was having a few adult beverages. But I got to meet Kate Kelly, who was seeing him at the time. And I think this is not something that I just believed in. Kate really loved Doug. They were a power couple. And if Doug was a tad more responsible sometimes, he probably would have married or could have married Kate. They could have been the proverbial, not only the power couple, but the truly fallen in love kind of couple. And she, of course, worked at Channel 5. She went to Stanford. Her real name is Kate Supple. And she came from a very privileged family and a nice lady, terrific lady. And many times, and I wrote this in the blog, Kate has still with us, obviously, this most beautiful appearance, and oftentimes was compared to, because she looked so much like her, Princess Grace. Take a look at old pictures of Kate Kelly. She absolutely looked just like the late Princess Grace. It was almost eerie to even discuss it. So Doug was big sports fan. I can remember Doug used to be smoking cigarettes and drinking a beer and going to the King's X. That was his hangout. He loved that place because it was a regular little tavern, like still there, by the way. The building, it is a bar. It's just not the King's X anymore. I don't even know what it is, but it was sort of a hangout. All the various celebrity people that went there didn't want to be known as celebrities, so they kind of hung out there because they weren't bothered. There was a guy named Lou Grant, who was the very, very famous newspaper photographer for the old Oakland Tribune, and whose namesake was spun into the Lou Grant show on CBS, which was big time Joe Rossi, who was played by Robert Walden. And anyway, Lou Grant hung out at the King's X, as did, excuse me, some of the great Chronicle East Bay reporters hung out there. Reggie Jackson, the baseball player, loved playing Miss Pac-Man there. People like Bob Sarlott, the comedian from San Francisco, played there. King's X was this old style tavern. They had trivia tournaments. That was the birthplace of trivia, and also the birthplace of what you call today the football draft. All these fantasy drafting, NFL football, it all started in the late 60s at King's X in Oakland, right up there near the cemetery, the famous cemetery on Piedmont Avenue and Pleasant Valley Road. It's kind of on the outskirts of Rockridge. Nice area. But anyway, Doug Murphy was a big time. He lived in Piedmont, big time King's X Tavern frequenter. He lived in Piedmont, and I keep saying, he was a celebrated character. Oh my God, Doug Murphy. One of these days, I'm going to tell some detailed stories about Doug Murphy. Real good guy. Should not have died in 2005. He was living in Lafayette, and there was a fire. And anyway, it's a real sad story. Okay. Please subscribe to my channel here on YouTube. If you can donate, contribute, that'd be great. Just hit the PayPal icon. I will be back one of these days, probably tomorrow. Have a great Thursday. Thanks for watching and do contribute. See you later.